I just remembered the memory of images like our white diapers, our brown skin,
Yeah.
screen door swinging open, us screaming, running up to the back door of the house, which faced the ocean. It was the one on Lillipuna, across from Coconut Island.
You drove us by it one time.
Oh.
Yeah, it sure did, or more than once.
Yeah.
And I was crying, and the screen door swinging open, and my dad taking one of us in one arm, one of us under the other arm, and into the house, and placed us on our bellies on one of those mahogany tables that we still have,
Oh, no way.
with the round legs that were cut short by Nanu, who my mom never forgave for cutting the legs off, for one thing. Or she was always unhappy about that.
Yeah.
And so I remember take us into the screen door, and one of my parents, and I think it was my dad, handled me, and my mother handled John. Belly down on each of two mahogany tables, and got out my pearl plastic handle cap guns that you used to shoot real caps. And those little red strips, and they'd go bang, and you smell the smoke. And they each took a gun. My dad gave one gun to my mom. I kept one gun. I mean, my dad kept one gun. And he would peel back our diapers, and the bees had stung us and crawled in onto our butts, and scooped the bees away till it fell on the table, and hit it like a hammer, using the barrel as a hammer's handle, and the butt as the hammerhead, and boom, 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 and flatten each of them. That was a trip.
Do you remember like seeing the beehive?
Yeah. It wasn't a wild beehive. It was those white boxes.
No way.
Yeah, and so it's very domesticated, right there on the ground. Bees flying in and out of a big slit near the bottom, as you know how that works.
So
You
where'd
guys
you
just
stick?
the stick in the slit?
Oh, we wherever the bees were active, we just kind of tease them with the stick. Stupid.
You learned.
That was
Yeah,
a life
yeah.
lesson you never
Wow.
forgot.
That's one of our first lessons, I guess. I don't know. You know that house. So I was born in that house, or not. I was born in Kapiolani Children's Hospital in Honolulu in 1950, but we were living in that house. So we came home, and that was our home house, and we had two dogs, Gable, a poodle, and Joe, the boxer, and we'd have to leave the dogs at home, but it's so dangerous on the street right up there that when we leave the house, we'd have to have a pause before letting the dogs out of the house to come play, and my dad liked them to run free, I guess. And he rigged one of the windows. I don't know how he set it, what the timer was, but he rigged up a pulley system. and at us like 3 minutes after we left or something, or 15 minutes, I forget which, the window would roll up. It was this double hung window. It was counterweighted. So my dad figured that out.
That's fun.
Yeah,
Wow.
but the coolest thing was, and we still have it, is that double barrel 410 shotgun, and that's in your gun case, Peter, at the main house. And my dad and I, the full moon was going over Kaneohe Bay, behind the coconut trees that grew on the slope that runs down to the water at Kaneohe Bay facing west. That we would sit on the grass and again and lean against the back of the house, like under our bathroom window, where there was all wall there, and we weren't bothering anybody. And my dad would watch rats run up the stalk of the coconut branch, of the palm branch, because of the slope, the branches are at our eye elevation. It's perfect. And they were fat rats. And they were running across in the moonlight, maybe not directly, or maybe directly, in front of the moon, and the big rat would just magnify in your vision. And then my dad would take, and because the shot would shoot over the bay too, so when it couldn't hurt anybody. He'd follow a rat up, shoot, big explosion, rat would fall off the limb, fall down through the bushes, you hear a thud, and the dogs were with us, and they were waiting, and one of them would take off into the darkness down the slope and look for the rat. Is that
No
a trip?
way.
Yeah, and we still had the double barrel shotgun. It's in
The rat hunter.
it's in the gun
That's
case.
amazing.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's cool. There it is.
That's nice.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, those are the days.
What about the one where you and John are in the tree? Something about a hatchet.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. So after Lilipuna, where we lived for my first 3 years,
Uh-huh.
and then my dad was having the house in Kaneohe built. We needed a place to stay for a year and a half, so we rented a house up in Halico. Halico is in Kaneohe. There's a milk dairy right. If you drive up Halico Road and went right, you go right to a milk dairy, and then where the milk cows came in from the field and were milked. And we lived to the left up. The road went around the base of the hill, Halico, and we lived there. And it's the same kind of a situation where a breadfruit tree in the backyard grew on a slope in the middle of the yard, just downhill from the house. It's the house's backyard, and the bottom of the slope goes into a hollow tree forest. It is crazy, and it's just a jungle. And John and I climbed the tree, the breadfruit tree, with an axe, one of those small hand axes that you can handle with one hand.
How old were you guys?
Between 3 and 5.5, because 5.5 we moved to the Kaneohe house.
Okay.
Because it had just been finished built.
You guys just allowed to cruise around with the hatchet?
And climb trees?
Yeah. So we went up there with the intent. I don't know what our intent was, but trim a branch, maybe build a fort on a couple of big limbs or something. I have no idea. So we went up there and we're pretty high, but with the slope of the grass lawn, we were kind of close to the grass lawn. Although it was below us, we were up high. And and John said, "I'm going up to the house." I don't know why. And I told him I'm not ready to go yet, and don't go now. And he said, "I'm going to go." And so all he would say is, "I'm going to go." And then he got and said, "Don't go now." And he climbed down the bottom of the hill, and I watched him climb down, and he got out of the tree, and he started walking up the slope to where he was closer to me than normal because of the slope. And I told him, "Better come back to the tree," or something like that. And he didn't say anything. He just didn't turn his head. His head was away from me. And so I'm gonna throw it. I'm gonna throw it now, meaning the axe. To throw it up the hill. I throw it onto the hill, up the slope, because I was going to then come down and walk up to the house also because I wasn't going to stay down there by myself. He left, I wasn't ready to be alone. And after a warning or two like that, I'm going to throw it, I threw it. And I just didn't look, I just threw it towards where John was. And the darn thing went and hit him in the back of the head.
But the butt part, right? Not like the.
I don't know. I think it was the butt part of the axe, personally. But he had to get stitches, nevertheless, right on the back of his head.
He did.
Yeah, and you can ask him about that.
I'm going to.
Yeah, if he
Yeah.
remembers that, or to what
That's a
detail.
really good question.
Yeah.
Or to what detail he remembers it, or how he remembers it, exactly what happened. But it's trippy. Just like at the Kaneohe house that we moved into,
Yeah.
John and I were always fishing, literally fishing, crabbing,
Yeah.
whatever. And we had fish nets and crab nets, and our dad went fish in his boat and took us, and so we're real familiar with the water
Yeah.
at our age. And we would, my dad had these wooden spears, wooden 3-pronged spears, so they had a metal cap and that with 3 prongs were welded on and come out kind of sharp, as sharp as you wanted to make them and keep them. And John went down and we're always getting Samoan crabs and bringing them up and spearing them through the shell in the back and giving them to our mom to boil for us, and we would eat, or I think we would eat. And one time John got a crab and I didn't get a crab, and John and our parents were in the master bedroom, and we went up to John went up to show his crab to my parents, and he still had it on the end of his spear, and I didn't have any on my spear. And so my spear is pointing down, but it's a long wooden handle like an oar handle. And John walks into the bedroom and look what I got, a crab on the end of his spear. And my parents say, wow, that's a big one. And I said, yeah. And I just stood next to him and I lifted up my spear and brought it down right onto his foot.
Oh no.
Yeah,
You speared his foot?
Yeah, I speared his foot. It just pricked, but the whole idea was I was jealous, and it was obvious. And
Did it go through his foot?
no. It was just I just kind of dabbed it, just to get the point across, literally, without knowing I was doing that.
You had a temper.
Yeah, kind of a jealous streak and
Yeah.
temper, and gotta have it my way. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
But the coolest thing about Kaneohe
Yeah.
was what I showed you guys. What the dinghy, remember when we took you out? And then I stood up and I rocked it and I sunk it on the
Yeah.
mud and you guys kind of panicked. And
Yeah,
But the
kinda
whole
sounds
idea-
like an understatement. We absolutely panicked.
but the whole idea was to show you guys that that's really safe. If
Yeah.
you just experience it, then you know it's not an end.
Yeah.
It's just a means to get
Yeah.
back in. Then you just float it and get back to the shore, and it's a pretty cool lesson.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that in mind, when we were younger, the lot of construction of the houses in the neighborhood were underway,
Yeah.
and they were using rolls of black tar wrapped in paper, and they were melted in a big heater vat that was towed like a cement mixer behind, or bigger, like a generator is towed, that size, and behind a truck. So they're rented, I guess, by the contractors. and we would try to make use of this tar, and we'd ask for some of the tar to chew because we thought we could chew it like gum, and we did, and it was okay. But the coolest thing was we used to get corrugated tin that we'd find around, and say a 6 foot piece of corrugated tin roofing material. And we would get a 2x4, so it's half the width, and bend one end. I think this is my idea. I don't really know, but I think so, or some adult told us that we could do this. But again, I was pretty young, 7 or 8 years old or something like this. And take a piece of 2x4 and cut it with a handsaw, because my dad had handsaws. We were always cutting stuff, so we know how to square a board and cut it, and then force a nail through the metal roofing into the 2x4, and then if we could get it all to go all the way through. Anyway, the ideal thing was to nail both sides. So sandwich the end against the 2x4 flat on each end, and then get this tar and melt it on our kitchen stove in a guava can. You buy guava juice in a can, and you triangle punch a hole in 2 holes, one for air and one for pouring, and use pliers to hold this hot because there's no handle, and it all went well. There was no catastrophe. It could have been, I guess, now that I think on it. And melt tar, put some chunks of tar that we could break in it with a pliers, with a screwdriver or something, and throw them in, melt them on the stove, use the pliers to handle this hot tar that could be poured, and then go pour it onto the joint of the wood to the corrugated metal, and seal it. And those became canoes. Huh. And we actually got so elaborate that we built the pontoon too, to balance it, and it would balance, and tie it, pound a nail through the side that we could get a piece of wire or string cord through, and tie the crossbar that we would sit on, and then if we're lucky to find a piece with the ama, they call ama, yeah. That hooked in down to the ama. Then, well, whatever we got, usually I don't think we usually got that, and fashion the ama onto the canoe so it would balance, and we could paddle it across to one of the 3 islands. And we did island 1, 2, and first island, second island, and baby island, because one was a real small little island. And sunk it and sink them, often sink them, and then refloat them, because they're just solid once they're full of water. They went down. Mm-hmm. To wait for low tide to stand on the bottom and lift it up and pour enough water out, and we could start scooping water with another guava can or a plastic cut plastic container. Yeah.
That's cool.
You know, and the dangerous thing was that it was all mud flat. But the mud flat was dredged material. That's what the islands are made from, to dredge for channels in front of the houses, to sell them for more, I guess. Mm-hmm. And well, we would go camp on the islands, and once we had a thing called the Hawaiians versus the Pirates. And the Hawaiians were all the girls in the neighborhood, and young girls, and like us. And the Pirates were all the boys in the neighborhood, which was like us, but not but so we opposed the girls, and one would take their canoes or dinghies from the parents' house, and the Hawaiians would go camp on the island and build a fire at night, cook hot dogs generally, and not necessarily much marshmallows. And we would attack them at night, but it wasn't really much of an attack. Well, he said that we had Milo nuts, so we could throw them from our yard and lob them over into the lighted center of the island where they had a fire. And then one of their parents, Danny Blanchard.
How old were you?
Yeah.
Then, well, everything seemed to happen between the time I got to the house,
So 5.5.
plus a couple of years. Yeah, that's 5.5. Plus a couple of years, and until I was about 11 or 12.
Okay.
And Danny Blanchard lived up in the corner house with his sisters. He had a lot of sisters and a baby brother, I think. And his parents thought I was, and probably was right, thought I was the badass kid in the neighborhood. And I really liked Danny. He was a good friend. He was like a best friend kind of guy. And wouldn't let me play with him anymore.
Oh.
I had to stay away and not. Just like Bruce Raby was a bad one for me. And my mom, once he lassoed me off a horse, and I fell on the asphalt face first and knocked unconscious, and my mom took me to the hospital or the clinic in town, and I was ranting and raving. She said in my unconsciousness, she said I couldn't see Bruce Raby ever again, and told him to stay away from the house. Same thing. He was a bad influence. I was a bad influence for Danny Blanchard. But in the garage where you have that chest freezer, Genta, there's that round weight with DB. That was Danny Blanchard made that. And he made that with lead sinkers we found in the bay. And my dad, he had molds to collect old sinkers and melt them down into lead bodies for marlin lures. It's really cool. And that's left over, and that was that round weight that with the drilled name I forget.
Maybe, I think.
Yeah, DB or D Blanchard or whatever. But that was his name, Danny Blanchard. And I really liked one of his sisters, Wendy. I mean, I was attracted to her.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing ever came of that, especially once I was deemed the bad guy. The whole family had to stay away from me. And I was told not to come back and talk to Danny anymore, or something like that. Yeah. That's the weights. We would collect those weights out of Kapapa Island. In the shallow surge of the water going around the point of the island, the fishermen would cast from the island for Ulua. And we would camp at the island, and there are moi living there too, which are really good eating fish. And we would swim with the current hitting us. We'd just swim directly into the current, and the bottom was all lava with holes in it, where all these sinkers would be washed and thrashed and end up filling these holes. And we just got tons of lead sinkers. To us, lead sinkers were valuable. And we would spend the night on the island. We learned how to get through the reef, and my dad showed us an anchor and spend the night, anchor the boat and spend the night. And there's a little sand beach on the island on the Mauka side, on the outside. And we were always really hungry because just eating hot dogs wasn't enough. And wake up in the morning. I remember waking up in the morning one morning and walking the beach with a couple of the other Kenny Fink and another guy, and came across bones coming out of the sand because it had been the beach, that little bit of sand beach, which probably isn't there anymore, would be eroded by the weather because the weather blows in from the north out from out of sea, and then it gets replenished, I guess, somehow, and found Tad Nottage, found a whole skeleton, a person.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a trip. And you see the hands and the hand bones, it's all coming out of the sand. Like this person was laid down, I don't know, belly first, which doesn't sound right, and probably face up. And Tad Nottage was all excited, and he took the skull and took it home, and his dad got so pissed and said, "You got to take it back out there and put it right back where you found it."
Yep.
Because of the bad luck and messing with the spirits and that kind of thing. And so we did. Or he did. I didn't take any bones. That was really cool. I mean, amazing to see that. Yeah. Well, thanks for egging me into this.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all the stories.
Yeah, well,
That was fun.
they all link to
Yeah.
my lifetime,
Yeah.
and then to whatever we were doing.
Yeah.
Throwing an axe in John's head. The Hawaiian family that lived at the bottom of Halico and lived on the corner of the road that went to the dairy. And I really liked one of the guys that was the Hawaiian, the real Hawaiian, I mean like 100% Hawaiian, I'm thinking. And I would go play with them all the time.
Gina, let me see you, man. I see.
Oh, yeah.
And once I had to take a dump, and I had to tell him, I got to take a BM, a bowel movement, but I called it BM because that's what my parents had taught me.
Yeah.
And I told
They had
them,
no idea.
and they had no idea, and it embarrassed me. Yeah, BM. What's that? It's so easy to say, but to
Then explain.
yeah, and then to explain it to somebody's hard.
Yep.
What was it?
Yeah, sure.
What's the